You silly. I'm trying to get this glare off my glasses, so don't mind me. But let's get it.
We are recording. We are recording. I am Dr. Torri J. I'm the founder and CEO of the Fatherless Generation Foundation, and I am excited about this moment because for the last 3 weeks we have been talking about living with a mama's boy and living with an emasculated woman. And so when we have those conversations, we pulled out a few things that have come out in the conversation. Things like, I didn't recognize where I had steered my son the wrong way. I didn't recognize where my mother was the first woman to ever emasculate me. So now I'm triggered by the woman I'm married to. And today we want to have the authors, the coaches, the experts in this room come on and talk about why they wrote these books and just what it means to them. So I have brought on Glenn and Sheri Brooks. They are everything. They've coached us in our marriage. I've known them for how many years? I keep seeing our memories come up, y'all. We were just at the mall with Tatiana and my homegirl.
Yeah. Well, we released this book in 2013, Torri, and I think that we met you shortly, at least face to face, shortly before that.
Yeah.
So maybe like 2012.
Yeah.
And we started following you. I think it may have been Instagram or it was Twitter or something, like a little bit before we physically, because it was such a big thing.
You were like one of the first.
You were famous as far as we were concerned.
I was like, oh my God. I was like, that's her. That's her right
we went to a function, not anticipating seeing you. And it just so happens we knew some mutual people. Yes. And Sheri was like,
that's her. I know her.
No, isn't that? I'm like, girl, this is embarrassing. Just go and ask the lady if that's.
And we were sitting across from each other, I think.
We were actually at the same table.
Each other. I used to be a shaker.
Right? I love it, Torri. But no, it's been a long journey, and I'm just grateful, for the opportunity we've had to work together and build together. Quite frankly, I was there, after you've gotten married, and continue to work with you guys, and it's just an honor. So I appreciate the opportunity. Let's get into this content. Anything we can do to help right here.
So the book is called Living with the Mama's Boy. That's the book that we've been sharing. But Glenn, you wrote a book before that I want to tap on just a little bit. The book is How to Raise a Man and Not a Mama's Boy. Yes. That takes a lot to have that conversation and to admit some of the things you've admitted in this book. How did you get there, Glenn?
Well, I think that for me, and as you guys are tuning in, first of all, humbled again to be on your platform, Torri. We are huge fans of the Fatherless Generation in terms of what you do. But for me, that book was birthed out of my real life experience growing up as a kid who was raised by his mom, and later in life found out from her words and her lips that she really didn't know what to do with me. And that's pretty powerful when your mother, whom we were really, really close, probably too close, relatively speaking, and I can get into that into the book. But when I say just too close, that I identified with a woman because of the influence that she had on me unknowingly, just trying to raise me as best she can. She used to tell me all the time. Well, she told me later, as a matter of fact, it was when I wrote this book, I let her read the manuscript prior to releasing it. And I remember she broke down in tears and she said, I never knew. And those were her exact words. And she said, as a woman, I knew what to do and how to raise your sister intuitively because she's a girl, I'm a girl, I get that. But I didn't know what to do with you. And so I just did what I felt came naturally. And quite frankly, in that book, I go through things that mothers really don't understand unless someone has absolutely sat them down and schooled them on some stuff and said, hey, do you know that when you're doing this, this is how it affects him? And so I wrote that book from a 5 to 7 year old kid's perspective, in the sense that if you could peer into his life and if he could communicate with you what he was thinking, it really is a book about how moms can communicate more effectively with their sons, understanding that he speaks boy, and that's a very different language than what girls speak. So that's kind of how that book came about. And when we wrote that book, Sheri was cheering me on. And what I didn't anticipate was that I would get asked a gazillion questions at book signings and things when we were taking the book out and we were touring it. And people were like, yeah, this Mommas Boy, I get that, great stuff, love it. But what we gonna do with the grown version of him?
Ooh.
I was like, huh. So this came out of women asking me, like, I now understand the language, I understand the differences, I understand what I need to do to position him to become the best man that he can be. But what about when he grows up and I'm kind of married to his daddy? So, or to
the grown version,
to the adult version of him. And that's where I had to enlist the support of my wife. And it was her first time writing anything that published. It was our first co-writing effort. That was the first of, I think, 3 books that we've co-authored together. For those of you guys who don't know, by the way, my name is Glenn P. Brooks Jr. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a coach. I'm so sorry, so rude. And this lovely light-skinned lady sitting here next to me
is Sheri Brooks Jr. I'm an author, speaker, and relationship coach as well.
Yeah, so we do this every day, all day. Between the 2 of us, we've written 7 books. This is just one of them, where we're actually talking about 2 of them. And at the end of the day, we want to help parents connect to their kids in a way that changes the game. And I think, unfortunately, what people don't recognize, Torri, is that the parent part gives you access to them by birth, but it's the relationship building part that gives you access to them by work. And there's they're completely 2 different things. And I think that we assume that way too often.
We do. And so now we're talking about the collaboration.
Yes.
And what I recognized in the book from the collaboration was Sheri recognized that she had a Mommas Boy, but then at one point, a second one moved in. And so she wasn't only living with one. She was living with 2. Sheri, you got to tell me what that's like.
You put a price to one, right?
Okay. But I want to hear it from you.
Well, she wrote the book, Torri, so I mean, it's still enough. She wrote her part.
Right. So when we got married, I learned very quickly that Glenn had some Mommas Boy tendencies. And I want to say this just for clarification. I know a lot of people, when they think of a Mommas Boy, they're thinking of this very passive, very they got to be all up under their mother. They're expecting a woman to take care of them type mentality. That was not Glenn's mentality. It was simply that because he had been raised by women, he processed more like a woman, emotionally and even intellectually. He looked at things more from a more sensitive perspective. He was very in touch with his emotions, and he just processed in that way. It had nothing to do with his masculinity at all. It was just the way that he processed. But in that, like Glenn is a talker, which is partially his temperament, but also it has to do with him being raised by a woman, because women typically are chatty. And so he adopted that. And also when, after we got married, when I had interactions with our son, Justin, from the time he was very small, from before we got married and when we got married. But once he came to live with us, I realized just how much of a Mommas Boy he was as a child, because I had raised a daughter. I had a daughter. I didn't know anything about raising boys. And I had in my mind this idea of what boys were like. And I realized that he, because he was being raised by a single mother, even though Glenn was very much involved, he was home. His mom was his primary caregiver. He was around his grandmother. And so he had picked up a lot of tendency. You know, if she had stuff to do, if she was going to the salon, she was taking him with her. If she had to go shopping, he was going with her. You know, so he was accustomed to those things. So I would notice little things. He'd be like, "Well, you going to wear that with that?" I'm like, "Why do you care what I'm wearing? What is this? I don't need you thinking like this." Right. And it was just little things that I picked up on. And I realized that I had not only adopted one Mommas Boy, the grown version, but also the miniature version. And I realized that there were some things, as much as I'm female, I was kind of the opposite. We kind of flip-flopped in some senses, in a sense, because I had been raised by myself. You know, my parents were in the home, but I was pretty much left to myself. My father had, he was an alcoholic growing up. When I was growing up, my mom was very distant. So all of my friends were guys. So I, on the opposite end, had adopted a mentality more of a male. Yeah. In the sense that even when it came to relationships, I handled relationships more like a dude than I did a female. So it's like we were flip-flop in a lot of ways, which was really weird, because it's things that he did that or the way that he thought and he processed. Typically, I probably should have been processing that way, but I wasn't. And so it was a really interesting dynamic. We had to learn and identify the differences as I was growing as a woman into my womanhood. He was also growing into his manhood, and then also being able to raise this little man to become a man. After him having been in that type of environment, I realized there were a lot of boundaries, a lot of things that I could not do with him. Because, like I said, I was used to raising a girl, but I realized very early I had to raise him differently. I could not raise him the same way I was raising my daughter.
Absolutely.
And what I like here is you have 3 different lenses.
Right.
The grown mama's boy, yours, which is this masculine energy that if you're raised in a single mama home or some type of dysfunction, every woman has it. And we talked about this on our lives, so my people know exactly what I'm talking about. And then now you have the young man, the boy who's already been groomed to be a mama's boy, and how do you deal with that? So let me ask this question, because this just is in my head. So how do you navigate role reversal?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what that is in that moment, from processing to have a successful marriage of 21 years, because you guys have been doing the marriage coaching a long time. You know, people opt out at that. That's like a deal breaker for them. Not recognizing how people's backgrounds, how they're raised, all of that creates that. So how do you navigate this role reversal that's happening in processing your home?
Well, I think at the beginning it's being self-aware. I think the fact that we were both very much aware of where we were by the time we got married, like I knew that I had been flowing inappropriately. I wasn't flowing in my role as a wife, in my role as a mother. I had been flowing. I had picked up a lot of stuff that I shouldn't be conducting. And like you said, as being a single, because I was a single parent for a number of years, so I was used to handling my business. I was running everything. I was the head honcho. Wasn't nobody gonna be the boss of me. Absolutely. I was running everything. So I realized from the very beginning that I had to learn, and I'm gonna say it's a 4-letter word, even though it's more letters to it than 4. I had to learn submission. And I had to learn how to be able to submit and allow him to be the man. Right. So I had to take my pants off and put on a skirt, basically.
Now, baby, you know half the audience, because they're like, wait a minute, hold up.
Right.
I can do just as well.
Right, but I'm not. But I'm not dealing with it. I'm not.
Ride with us for a minute,
right now. But that is, I mean, that's a mentality shift I had to make. I had to switch from me, being the man, me being, carrying myself in a role where, I was the head. I was going to run everything. I didn't need to check off with you. I didn't need to do any, I was independent. I had to go from being independent to interdependent. And so I think that was the biggest thing for me initially, was making that mental shift. And then the action started coming after that, once we made that mental shift.
So let me just chime in really quickly, because I know quite a few people are like tuning out by now. They're like, are these people?
Right.
Are they with us? Okay. All right.
Trust me.
So one of the things that I recognized really quickly is that Sheri was doing relationships out of survival. Like most people.
Say that.
Sheri, when I met her, she was doing relationships from a survivalist mentality. And when and fellas, let me help y'all understand something so that you're super clear. When you meet a woman, 30 plus, particularly when she's black or brown, she is used to, by default, handling her own business. And that looks like something. So by the time you introduce yourself and you come into the picture, you bring in your kids or your child or whatever the case may be, she's coming from the standpoint of being head of household, super independent. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. As a matter of fact, again, we said that she had to be those things in order to survive. In order for her to make it in this world, she had to become all things to all people, that she might keep her sanity. I know that's not how the scripture goes, but I'm just helping you out. So when I come on the scene, and to go back to your question, how did we deal with those role reversals? I too was navigating relationships through survival. And I think that level of self-awareness for both of us came after we sort of migrated from our previous marriages. She had been married twice before. I was married once before. At the time we met, we were actually both separated, heading to divorce court. we were doing a lot of self work. We were doing a lot of personal development on ourselves when we met each other. So it was in that discovery that we begin to identify some things like, hey, we've been in survival mode all these years. What does it look like to now go from independent to interdependent? And that's one of the things, quite frankly, I think that people get misconstrued in relationships. We're not meant to be codependent. We're not meant to be dependent. We're not meant to be independent. We're meant to be interdependent. That means woven together in such a way where when one picks up, the other leaves off, and there's this mesh, there's this grafting that takes place that allows you guys to walk in lockstep. You're actually two individuals, but the way you sync up, you lock together and you move as a unit. Now, at any given point, you can come apart and still handle your business, but it's more from a how can we do things together? It's with the team in mind. It's with the end game in mind that we begin to do this. So that role reversal starts at self-awareness, and I think it quickly, when that self-awareness is there, it allows you to move in what is one of the 4 components of emotional intelligence, and that is self-management. It allows you to move from, okay, I know what's up, I know what I need to do. Now let me move into self-management so that I can actually execute and pull that off.
Right. And if I can add one other piece, when you talk about roles, I want people to clearly understand that, the traditional roles of husband and wife, I think that you as a couple have to determine what your roles are. It does not mean that, and I just want to backtrack a little bit when I talked about taking my pants off and putting my skirt on. That did not mean that now I became Little Miss Homemaker.
Not at all.
That's not what that meant at all. But it meant that at this point, there were some areas I had to pull back on. I had to step back and allow him to lead. But that did not mean that now I'm picking up all these, because I am not the traditional Susie homemaker at all. I mean, I do my part. I contribute to the household. I do all of that. And we share in the traditional roles when it comes to the house. We share in that. We both flow in our strengths. Whatever area we are each the strongest in, that's the area that we take the responsibility for. So Glenn, in a lot of ways, is a better cook than me. So he may cook sometimes. Sometimes I cook. I clean. I mean, it's not I don't want people to get stuck on the term roles.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes we'll get stuck on that a man's role is this and a woman's role is that. No, I think you flow in whatever your strength is. Absolutely. But I think there should be a pecking order in sense when you are married. The husband should be the lead. He should be the leader, the overseer.
Yeah, we're both ex-military, so we think chain of command in that regard. And so there is an order to it, but I think that it's just more organic than it is this whole idea of building something around this one thing that never changes. We've done a lot of talking. You're the host here.
No, that's what I talk all the time on Healing Tuesday. I am fine. What I like about what you guys are even saying, that I need to mention something, because all of this self-awareness and all this self-work. I made a post this morning on Dr. Torri J, and it was a meme that said your coping mechanism of protection has now become your prison. And one man answered and said, because of my divorce and the things that I've gone through, I'm raising my daughter, I'm focused on that, and I can't imagine another relationship. He's afraid. And a lot of people who are on this page they're in parental alienated situations. They come from divorces. They're frustrated. And when you guys are talking about this, what they don't know is, Sheri, this is your 3rd marriage.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, so
her 3rd, my 2nd.
Yes.
Let's be clear that these people have not gotten it right every time, but they have fought through it to ensure that the places they were traumatized, they healed. And that's what this conversation is always going to be about for me. So I want to go to this next place, because there were some key moments in this book that I was like, whoo, when I write my book, I got to do something like that. I'm over here scrambling, trying to write.
Now, it was 2013 when we published it. We probably wrote it in 2012. So you're going to have to remind us of what you saw and what stood out. I feel like the artist who done forgot the words to his own song. I really wrote it, but that was a minute ago.
I'm gonna tell you. So the part that really was like the first part where I was like, "Whoo, this is powerful." When you had the male and female's perspective of what a man is. Mm-hmm. When you literally put what people were talking and their answers. And when I was reading them and then I read them on the live, there was a place where I was questioning, are women in a fantasy world? And do men get what manhood is, but yet they have trouble executing it?
Yeah.
You guys talk to me about that moment.
Well, I think that for me, when I begin to define what is a man and what we begin to look at, I think one of the challenges is that oftentimes manhood has been defined by everything outside of men. And when you see that, what happens is it shapes your manhood perspective. So, for instance, if the movies depict men as not being responsible, particularly whatever the culture might be, if the magazines depict a man as 6'4" and he is this look and that sort of thing, if the news, the media depicts a man as absent or whatever the case may be, both men and women will derive their definition of manhood from those mediums. And I think the challenge is that you're skipping past, and I'm just going to say this, and I'm sure most of your audience will get this, you're skipping past the purpose from the creator. So when you think about a thing, I need people to really, really stop for a second and go back to the originator of that thing so that you can get a proper definition, a proper look. And I think that when you begin to do that, you'll begin to see that God actually placed us on the planet for very specific things. And when we operate in those things, things go well. Here's the challenge. In most cases, and I can say this, and Torri, you do this work in the fatherless generation, one of the things that we're finding is because of the absence of men, the absence of fathers. Here's one of the things that I think that women unfortunately think is a given. Because he's a man, he will understand what being a father looks like because it comes out of manhood. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. Yeah. That stuff is taught. Right. Even what a true man looks like has to be modeled. And when I grow up and I don't see that model, that's what my first book kind of depicted. It's how do you raise a man and not a mama's boy? First of all, you're going to have to put him in front of a man, right? Because that's where he's going to get his identity from, because he came to this world with testicles and a penis. And so therefore, he be a boy, he be a guy, he be a man. And so if he has another man to be able to emulate those kinds of things, the chances are he's going to pick up. Now, is he going to pick up some negative stuff? Sure. Is he going to pick up some positive stuff? Absolutely. But what you need to understand is that shaping or that framework comes from identifying that. And so for us, we began to see what those definitions, and that's kind of where that started, and that whole, and so we just went into just breaking that down. When you see this is what that is. And I think it's a good read for the reader, because I'm not sure that people really stop and kind of looked at it from that perspective.
Right. And I think I'm going to go back to what you originally said, Torri. And I do think that women do, we do, our image of men is a fairy tale.
Yes.
It is. It is. We have this Heathcliff Huxtable image, the prince from Snow White or whatever, that this is what a man is supposed to be. And because oftentimes it comes from, because even for us as females, there's a missing father figure. And so we create in our mind what that father figure should be.
Absolutely.
So that's what a man should be. So we create, even if we have a father in the home, we create this perfect image of what a man is supposed to be. It starts in childhood. You know, you playing games, you playing, you know, with your dolls, the man is going to be the prince, he's going to be the king. And so this is inbred in us from a very small age for women. And unfortunately, we don't see the reality of when our brothers are not being raised with that type of image before them, or that example. How do we expect them to become that?
Yeah.
If it's not set before them. But I think that as women, we have to let go of those fairy tale images and see them as just human.
And that's human. The part we miss. That's the part we totally miss. Because when I read this, I was like, did women really say that? And you get to the men and they have most of them are very clear on what a man is. But the women, I'm like, I don't know if that's really what men do.
You're supposed to be my protector.
Right, and it's funny.
You're gonna rescue her.
Right,
And
if you get a guy like me who was raised around a bunch of women, my response when I hear somebody walking downstairs might be to call 911 and I go get my gun.
Right.
Hello?
Right.
Now, people look at me and say, well, black people don't call 911. Well, I did. Because when I grew up, my mother was sitting up there petrified with the rest of us. And here she's supposed to be the leader.
Right.
And we like, Ma, did you hear that? She's like, yeah, did you hear that? I said, yeah. Well, and we're sitting there debating between the three of us who gonna go down and investigate.
Right. And you're asking her what to do, and she's saying call 911.
And she's like, call 911,
right.
Call the police. Like, I don't know what else to do. So now I'm being shaped in that mindset. So I don't grow up fighting people. I don't grow up I don't grow up that protector. I grow up being bullied. I grow up being picked on. I grow up being teased and going home crying to my mother because I don't know what to do. There is not an instinctual thing that comes out of me that says, if the dude say something about your mother, punch him in his mouth. No, if you said something about my mother, my feelings got hurt. Right. And I cried.
Wow.
And then I went home and I said, Ma, they talking about you. And calm down, son. Well, that's where she didn't know. Now, you have to understand, my father, former drill sergeant, 2 tours in Vietnam, man's man. I watched him punch a guy completely out for asking him to borrow a quarter. I could you not? Well, I didn't grow up with that guy. So I didn't know what that looked like. So that's why I think that it's really, really dangerous when we allow outside things to shape. So when you meet me, you have these automatic anticipations of what I should be, and you've not gotten to know me at all.
Nothing about your background. Nothing. A friend of mine, we had a very long talk one day, and I pulled this quote from him, and I use it in my speeches now quite a bit because it's a powerful piece to the identity of young men. And young women, but really the young men. He said, I need to be present for my children so I can speak to the good and the bad in them that comes from me. And that's that identity piece that you're talking about shaping. And when you don't have that, you just have, you just have what you got. And then you have to navigate this weird space with women who then think that you're coming already pieced together, already. And when you're talking about manhood and then people think you automatically know what fatherhood is. Well, fatherhood is actually the leap over being a husband. And
absolutely.
We're missing all three because fathers aren't where they need to be. Some are out, some are walk away, some are passed on, some are home and they're passive because they have emasculating women. And there's so many different tentacles that create the relationships we have.
Yeah.
When I started this, I want to get into some of the traits and the types of Mommas Boys. But when I started the conversation this week, God led me to Adam and Eve. Because if you're going to talk about a Mommas Boy, you got to have the counterpart, an emasculating woman.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, who are you blaming? Who's at fault? Mm-hmm. So when you put Adam and Eve and Adam standing there while the serpent's whispering to her, passive move, right? And then she takes a bite. Okay, you out of pocket. Because now you doubted, right? You doubted what he told you that God said. So now you're questioning his judgment. You're questioning his guidance. You're questioning his protection. You're questioning all these things. And then you then give him a bite, which is passive move. And then God says in the curse for the woman, your desire will be for your husband. And when I looked that up, it said to dominate. It ain't no attraction. It's to dominate your husband. So our DNA as a woman is to dominate and control our husband instinctually and naturally.
That's powerful.
Like, I can't believe I just discovered this.
And these are the reasons why, Torri, I think it's hugely important for people to step back and begin to do some real work and do some real research on what they're about to get into. Because I think, unfortunately, your expectations or your unmet expectations will jam you up because you're thinking that because this is the way you were raised, this is what men do, this is how they roll, and because my father did it, it was right, and that's what you should do. And it's like, bruh, first of all, there's more than one way to skin a cat, number one. Number two, just because he did it that way don't make me him. Number three, you got to do life with me, not him. So you'd want to get to know who I am. And that starts from who was I created to be. And if I'm off by the creator's outline or blueprint, I've got some adjustments to make. Your father wasn't my creator, nor was my father her creator. Right. So at this point, we got to supersede those kinds of things. And they too, I think, also, kind of stack up as those outside influences that if you're not careful, they will rob you of a really, really great relationship, because you're always trying to compare somebody to something that's basically a moving target, something that's not even really solid for real.
Right. Because when we come from these households, right, that stuff wasn't right anyway. It was dysfunctional.
Many cases it wasn't. Absolutely.
And we have to own that our parents, were a man and a woman, not a mother and a father, because that's a hard leap for many people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And our father has some of these traits we're about to get into, and these characteristics. So, right. Mr. People Pleaser, oh Jesus. Let's just say the group discovered real quick that Mr. People Pleaser could really quickly turn into Mr. Time Bomb. People are a minute.
100%. Absolutely.
So talk to me about Mr. People Pleaser. Just really, we're going to go through these really quickly.
So really quickly, a people pleaser from my vantage point, I grew up pleasing people in order to feel good about myself. Truth of the matter is that I would not tell you the truth because I couldn't speak truth to me. Mm-hmm. And so if I can't speak truth to me, I cannot say it to you. And thus I will tell you yes when I really want to say no. So how you think, what you think of me, how you and I interact and engage becomes paramount to my movement. So I'm not going to move if we're out of sync. So I will do whatever I need to do to please you. That is the guy that will often say a happy wife is a happy life. He finds himself tiptoeing through relationships, doing whatever it takes to, quote, make her happy, missing the point that she's human and so are you. And no one has the ability to completely be responsible for another human being's happiness. Now, I can provide the environment for where happy can live, but I cannot cause you to be happy. I can't cause you to be sad. That is your choice. And if I get caught up pleasing you more than I please God, then here's the problem. The problem is going to be that I'm never going to hit that moving target. So that's the people pleaser from my perspective.
Mr. People Pleaser is the stereotypical mama's boy. He's the one that's going to run to his mother, that's going to make sure she's okay with everything, that's going to need her approval for anything that he does in the relationship. So he is that mama's boy that, the mother is in the middle of the relationship because he can't tell his mother no.
Yep.
He can't tell his family no. So as the wife or as the mother of his children, you get put to the side because mama's going to be first.
Right.
Because he can't risk his mother not getting his mother's approval. And
if his mother is not around or wasn't around or influential in his life, a mother figure oftentimes shaped how he's going to treat you. And if she was domineering or if she was overbearing in any regard, I promise you she's going to trump whatever you, the wife, now has to say, because at this point, he's got to go find the approval. He's got to make sure he's pleasing mama before he pleases you. And then the other part of it is that he will begin to please you in very much the same kind of way. His goal is to make sure you straight, and he's going to do whatever it takes to make that happen, even if it's not the right thing.
So let's go here, because we've been talking about scripture, tapping around it. No, the Bible says leave and cleave. So what's the issue? What's the problem?
Absolutely.
Because you went there.
You're absolutely on it. And the problem is that most people don't read. Most people don't know scripture. Most people don't, if they do, they don't believe it or they don't live by it until it becomes a problem, and now they want God to fix it. That's the truth.
Right. Or their mother has become their God. Their mother is their God.
Oh, she all up in my memes. I say it all the time. Right. The single mama is a deity.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Not pull away from her.
Absolutely.
When he's wrong, even when she's lying straight to your face and you know it.
Right.
And especially now, girls, Sheri, no, we don't. It's not the same for us when it comes to our mothers. But the boys,
yes,
if you black or white, I've seen it in black, white, brown. There is something with this mother that
absolutely.
and she can do no wrong. And that's why Mr. People Pleaser is who he is, then basically is what you're saying.
100%.
Right. And to speak from from my perspective of talking about living with a mama's boy, talking about my little mama's boy, who's a big mama's boy. Well, he's not a mama's boy anymore. He's grown up. But with him, the thing that I realized very early on, that as a mother figure in his life, I had to sever that tie, in a sense that he was not so dependent that he needed that approval. And so I think oftentimes it's hard as a mother, because your attachment to your children, and I think I didn't understand this growing up. My father, as dysfunctional as my situation was, one thing that my father did very well was that at a certain point, he taught me, he pulled back in a sense that you got to be on your own. But I realized with my brother, they did not do that. They always had their hand in his pocket. He always had his hand in their pocket.
Right.
There was always this constant guiding, hands on. But with me as a girl, I got kind of pushed out the door. But for whatever reason, parents don't do that with their sons. It's like they don't feel like their sons are capable of, I don't know, surviving on their own or being able to. Yeah. They need this little extra something.
There's a myriad of reasons why that is. We don't have the time to go into it, but that was a lot of that was just has grown up in us culturally. Yes. And quite frankly, if you were not controlled, you got killed back in times of slavery. And obviously through the whole Jim Crow period, like you needed to step and fetch it and cower. And if you don't do that, quite frankly, and this is why I understand I don't demonize my single women or my single mothers, because that was also, let me control him before the world breaks you down or kills you or strips you. But the challenge becomes, and this is what Sheri and I really quickly found out, I had to remind myself and her, she was a single parent for 11 years prior to meeting me. There was a period where we had to make adjustments and give each other room. I call it living in the margin and being able to create some room where you can move. In basketball, they said you gotta have a little separation so that you can get your shot off. The problem is that nobody knows how to create separation in relationships. And so therefore we run into this clash thing. Thus the people pleaser becomes this yes guy, and it's whatever you say, and that will ruin your relationship. I know you don't have all the time in the world. We could talk about this all day long, but I only
I was trying to get close to 50 minutes here, so we
Okay, awesome.
What's crazy to me is all the stuff you're talking about, because we've dabbled around this, because I've been doing Healing Tuesday since last August. And the conversations that you're having, you're kind of putting them, a lot of them all into one right now, because that whole idea of parenting out of fear for a mom,
100%.
Her sons, is a real conversation, and teaching her daughter to be independent and strong. That's happening across the board
all day.
And culturally, it's where we are, because we believe, or our parents believe, that at some point this woman is going to be by herself.
Right.
And she's
absolutely true. Again, we talked about it earlier. It's the whole idea of growing up, learning how to survive and not thrive. You get in a relationship, survival mode should stop. And now it's about, how do we thrive? How do we make inroads together and grow this thing together? That never happens if you never move from survival, from surviving to thriving.
So let's talk about Mr. Narcissist, because I'm going to tell you, in this community, that word's thrown around so much, I had to do research and really get into it for a month. So let's talk about this guy.
He is all about himself. He's all about himself. He
is all about himself.
Yeah, I met him. I dated him. And
didn't like me very much.
I did not like him.
At all.
Oh, you're talking about looking at first.
Yeah.
He
was Mr. Narcissist.
That's why she had to help me write this book. There's no way I would have attempted to write this one without her.
Yeah. He's just all about himself. The world revolves around him. Everything is about him. You can start to have a conversation about your day. The conversation is going to turn to be about him. It's little things, and I'm not throwing no shade.
No, come on,
because you didn't
bring it.
So we would be going out. We'd be in the car to go stop and get gas. He'd go pay for the gas, go inside, come out with snacks for himself. I'm in the car. I'm like, did you think maybe I wanted some water?
Child.
Did you think? Just selfish.
Torri, it was
just
bad.
Completely everything is about him.
Then forgot they was even in the car. Whole family in the car. I got chips and the whole nine. I'm pumping gas, getting in the car, talking about, y'all ready to go? They looking at me like, so we don't get nothing? Like, are we on punishment here? Like, what's happening?
Right. But that often comes from when a man is raised by a single mother, he becomes her world and she pours everything into him.
Yes.
And so he's the center of her universe. So he grows up expecting to be the center of the universe for everybody else.
Absolutely.
And so when he gets in a relationship, he's expecting you to make him the center of your universe, that nobody else matters. It's just all about him.
1000%.
Because that's how he was raised.
Yep.
And I mean, I understand it from a single mother perspective. You know, you do put your all into your children, but there's a very fine line that has to be maintained where they don't then become selfish.
Absolutely.
And just not concerned about anybody else.
I want to also move to this really quickly, Torri, because I want to deal with the other ones as well. But this narcissist kind of guy, and I want to separate this from the sociopath guy who he is literally stealing from you. I'm not talking about that guy.
This is not a diagnosis, is what you're saying.
Exactly. I'm talking about the guy who's overly consumed with him, right? And so he has probably a better way to say this would be narcissistic tendencies. I don't know if he is by definition, a straight narcissist. Those are really bad people, really, really, really bad people. So, and I'm not saying that he's not, but the point I'm making is this, is that ladies, please hear me clearly. We was watching a YouTube channel, a young lady, and I was really impressed by, she's a single mother, teen mom. I was really impressed by her get up and go and her, ability to make things happen. And she was going to provide this. But one of the mistakes I see, again, not only young single moms, but single moms in general who are not being tutored or taught by their fathers or by men, is that they will make this son of theirs their little man. And that's a problem. And the reason why is because he is not your little man. Right. He is a boy growing to become a man. And the problem is that if he becomes the head of the house at 4, the head of the house at 7, I got to train him to be. So here's the problem. A, he gets robbed of his childhood, number one. B, he gets way too much responsibility for what he needs to do. So now his plight in life is to save you.
Right, to take care of you.
His plight in life becomes, and quite frankly, he's learned this at your knee. Your job is to take care of mama. So if the kid becomes an incredible athlete in high school, he gets a Division I scholarship, he goes to the league, the first thing he's going to do is take care of mama.
My house.
And he's going to buy my. Now, I'm not saying that he shouldn't do that. I'm not saying that he shouldn't want to do, but it's the place that I'm going to take this contract to get, it is my responsibility to get these people out the ghetto, out the hood and all. And I'm saying pump the brakes, be really careful, because if you're not careful, and again, guys, I am not saying he shouldn't have ambition. I'm not saying this kid shouldn't have drive. He shouldn't aspire to do some things. I get that. But when he's saddled with a responsibility that doesn't belong to him, and now he is made to feel, there becomes this performance thing that he will carry into relationships. And the problem is that the relationship will be characterized to start, end with him, to start, continue, and end with him. And I promise you, on most cases, and I get to coach people in these scenarios, on most cases, it's not going to spell good for the relationship. It's not going to end well.
I even did a podcast on it, The Soul of a Fatherless Man. Because there comes a point when he doesn't even want to be in a real relationship because he's been responsible for one since he was 7. So now trying to be in a relationship at 25, he's like, I'm good. I've been in a relationship with a woman. I know what that's like. And it's been trouble.
I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to do none of that because I've been doing that all my life.
And that's what women have to recognize. If this is Mr. Narcissist, they're like, why doesn't he want to be responsible? Why doesn't he want to commit? That was something that I knew it came out of my belly because I didn't even think of that. I was like, this man has been in a relationship his entire life. So no wonder he's now making it all about himself. And he's become a narcissist. So let's get into Mr. Time Bomb, because this was the one that we were all like, woo, child. I think in some ways I'd rather have Mr. Narcissist than Mr. Time Bomb.
Yeah, Mr. Time Bomb is a problem.
Yeah.
And the reason why is like a ticking time bomb, you don't know when it's going to go off.
Right. He is passive. He holds everything in. He does not communicate. Communication is not his strong suit at all. He things will bother him. He'll be bothering him, and he'll be like, everything's okay.
I'm straight.
He's not gonna confront any issues.
Nope.
He's going to just let everything slide. This is that whole mentality Glenn talked about earlier, the whole happy wife, happy life. He's going to just let you, whatever you want, whatever you need, you just go ahead and do it. And there's this constant build up inside. He's feeling disrespected. He's feeling overruled. And then it just comes out all at once when he just can't take anymore. And you're completely blindsided because he never learned how to manage his emotions. Because growing up, his emotions were squelched. His mother didn't let him. You're not allowed to get angry. You're not allowed to express your feelings.
So true.
And so when he becomes an adult, because he doesn't know how to do that, it builds up. And when it comes out loud. It comes out wrong. It comes out real rough. And if you're on the other end of it, it definitely is a time bomb exploding. Yeah,
one of the things that I want to caution ladies with, when you're dealing with a guy like this, he will often show himself and reveal himself when backed into a corner. And so when you're dating, if you're not careful and you don't pay attention to, well, have we ever had an experience where he was in a corner and you can't say that you have, and then you get married? And so his first experience is 2 years in when he loses his job and he's backed up into a corner. And now you have to watch him unfold and sort of navigate through that. And it doesn't happen with every guy, but if he's Mr. Time Bomb, what you will begin to do now is see the smolder. You will see the, I'm not doing this well. And there is this pacing kind of mindset that he has, and he's not doing well. And quite frankly, he can't communicate that because he's used to not talking. A lot of times from a temperament standpoint, if you've ever taken the DISC assessment, this guy's probably a high C. We call that the turtle. And he generally highly analytical. Yeah. He lives in his mind, and he's going to work it out. And so he's trying to figure out the answer to the problem before he says anything. And the reason why that communication is delayed is because he hasn't gotten the answer yet. And unfortunately, he can't tip you off to where he is until he explodes. And then that's when it all comes out, because now I've got it. And unfortunately, that explosion generally has quite a few casualties in its wake.
Yeah. That one right there, I was like, that's a turtle.
All day long.
Don't know, you need to take this assessment that Glenn and Sheri provides. We call it Welcome to the Jungle, but it really breaks down your personality, your temperament, and it gives you how to communicate effectively with the other person you're in relationship with. And it's helped me tremendously.
Yeah, absolutely.
I recognize that I have some domineering tendencies, but I'm an ambivert, right? I'm introvert, extrovert. But then when I'm stressed and frustrated, I turn into a turtle to a certain degree. And so Mark pointed out, I'm pretty balanced in this weird kind of way.
Yeah. And we all have all four of those animals in us. The question becomes, which one is going to take precedent over the other one? And a lot of times that's based on your education or lack thereof. And the other one is just purely your environment. What's pressing you in order to get that particular animal to rise up?
Well, I want to ask this question because it was one that was posed this week, and it was posed by my husband, and another person asked probably almost at the same time. And I think it fits well with Mr. Time Bomb. How do you get a man to break down his walls when he's Mr. Time Bomb and he's always been that? I was literally doing this on the live because I wasn't prepared for him to ask that question. He's not here. He's ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you get a man to break down his walls, Sheri?
Well, I think you have to create a safe space for him. You have to create an environment that draws him into conversations when it's not in crisis. And so you have to create an environment where you develop communication when it's not crisis, so that he feels safe to be vulnerable when he is when his emotions are high or when something's going on with him, he'll feel vulnerable. So that looks like, talking to him about things that may be somewhat sensitive and making sure that you don't make those little facial expressions, those little snide comments, being very aware of your demeanor when he does attempt to be vulnerable. Because with a person who is with the person that is a ticking time bomb, they will retract back very easily if they do attempt to step out. And so if they see the slightest sign that they're not being affirmed, and so it's giving them constant affirmation, which was hard for me because I grew up with the mindset that, you know, you just supposed to do what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Why do I have to tell you did a good job taking the trash out?
Take the trash out. Like,
take the trash out. That's what you're supposed to do. Right. But I learned that he needed affirmation.
Yeah.
And so I have to constantly give affirmation so that he realizes that he's safe. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things I do want to add to that is that when you ask the question, you know, how do you get this guy to talk? I think the truth of the matter is that you have to make sure that he understands that he's valued in a way that you need or you super desire his opinion on matters. And again, Sheri hit the nail on the head. This starts in non-crisis time. When you create an environment that's conducive for a turtle to come out of his shell, here's what I know. They will stay out of their shell. Right. If you ever notice the behavior of turtles, particularly on the shorelines of where they may habitate, the truth of the matter is that they'll come up on the shores and they will stretch out. Head out, legs out, tail out, and just dry out, relaxed. They don't stay up in that ball all the time. The truth of the matter is that their environment is warm. It's sunny out. There's nothing threatening them. And so if you can understand, it's your job to really lean in and really get inquisitive. That's the other thing I would tell you, Torri. You got to ask a lot of questions. This is where assuming will ruin you.
Yes.
Assumptions in this place will absolutely be to your downfall if you're dealing with Mr. Time Bomb, because you're going to assume you know where he's at, what he's thinking, why he's thinking. And I always tell people, listen, the older I get, the more I realize that assumptions will have me out there. And let's be honest, by definition, if it's an assumption, it means you don't have all the answers.
Right.
You don't have all the facts. That's why you call it an assumption. If it was factual, it wouldn't be an assumption. So I'm going to ask you to ask, not assume. Yes. And so when you ask, here's what I love about turtles. They love giving an answer because generally speaking, they're right. It's because of their highly analytical nature. Right. They're the ones that have done that research in their mind for weeks. And now you've asked the right question. And so now you position yourself to let them talk, and then you get to know how to navigate, and thus you diffuse that time bomb from going off. And before you know it, you got a situation where, you know what, now it's not nearly, you know, that bomb is actually a dud. It just ain't gonna go off like that. It's
and the thing that I'm really learning in my process is when you get a turtle to talk, it's not about having a rebuttal or even a dialogue and conversation.
Nope.
They just want to talk. And because I'm a dialoguer, it's met with, oh, you don't care about what I'm thinking. And it's like, oh, I'm just supposed to be submissive, right?
I'm just supposed to let her talk. This is a turtle right here.
Right.
Yeah, you just supposed to let the person
talk. Let me just shut up and listen.
And listen and be submitted in that moment. And it's not about dialoguing. And as a woman who's married to a turtle, I've definitely gotten that. I'm working on that because of my temperament, but I'm like, I got this.
Yeah, it's all a work in progress.
I'm like, I got this. We had a moment the other night and I was like, you know what, babe, you're right. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't know, but okay.
Right, I get it.
So let's get down to this last one, and then I'm gonna have you guys tell people how to reach out to you. So Mr. Sensitive, this is the one that I think a lot of women remembered when I asked them the different characteristics and or types of Mommas Boys. Most of them remembered Mr. Sensitive. So let's talk about Mr. Sensitive quickly here.
Well, I'll go first on Mr. Sensitive. That was me. I think I shared that in the beginning. Yeah. A lot of times when men grow up, particularly at the knee of women, and when I say at the knee, it's an old adage that said, hey, you know, this is where you were taught. You sat on the knee, and I'm going to put you on to what's really happening. When men grow up around women, they begin to process emotions like women do, as opposed to approaching things logically like men typically do. Their motto has been, no, it's not. You're not going to figure that out loud. You react emotionally. So if you're angry, show it. If you're sad, show it. If you're happy, show. If you're whatever you're feeling, express that. That's where the chattiness comes in. So when you're dealing with Mr. Sensitive, you're dealing with a guy who typically wears his feelings on his sleeve. Now, this is the guy that, quite frankly, if he's met with a domineering woman or a woman who has been used to running things, hint, hint, the single mother with the kid of 11 years, and she ain't got time for that. At that point, you too needy. Why you care about that? Come on, man up, bro. What's wrong with you? Why you all sensitive? Why you can't take a joke? Like, so at this particular point, it's not about those things. Right. It's about you're dealing with a person who feels. And quite frankly, they're very in touch with that. And if you want to really, really begin to associate with that, you really have to allow this person to invite you in and show you better than they can tell you. These are people, they want to show you how they tick. And I think, unfortunately, they're met oftentimes with people who ain't got time for that. And because of that, you don't learn that, no, that's the game. You know, the fact that, you know, I'll put it this way, and I'll let Sheri chime in real quick. You know, he will do something. You'll go, oh, like, that's endearing. I like that. That's really cute. But that's really who he is.
Right.
And so when he does those things over and over again, becomes bruh. Like, okay, all right, you know what I'm saying? So what you have to remember is that little moment, that's probably who that guy is. And unfortunately, if you don't recognize those things, you won't know how to navigate that. So that's my take on Mr. Sensitive. Oh, by the way, he is probably a high I on the DISC assessment. Yes. And we call that the flamingo. He's highly sociable. He has a ton of friends. He will, he doesn't hold grudges very long.
And lots of female friends.
Lot of female friends, but that's the way he was before you met him. I promise you.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to probably deal with that on some level. And we're not talking about boundaries, because I think that can get out of hand, and you got to figure that out. But that is a real thing with him.
Right. So Mr. Sensitive, most women fall in love with him initially because he's the one. He knows when you need something, or he's very caring. He's very hands-on. He's the romantic. He's in tune with you, unlike anybody you've ever dated before. He just gets me. He understands me. You know, I'm having a rough day, and I get home, and he's gonna have flowers there, and he's gonna sit and he's gonna massage me, and he's gonna do all of that. But over time, come on now, when life starts to hit,
let me get my offering bucket ready.
I don't need you to be Mr. Sensitive. I need you to rise up and
take charge.
I don't need you. I'm sitting here. I done had a rough day. I'm sitting here eating ice cream on the couch. I don't need you sitting beside me eating ice cream on the couch with me.
How about girl talk? It's gonna be okay, baby.
Right. I don't need that.
I'm gonna need you go get that joker. Like, so who did it? Where he at? Wait.
And so over time, this is, in a lot of time, especially as strong women, especially if you've been independent, we'll believe that that's what we want in a relationship. But then after you get in the relationship, you realize, but I'm
really looking for a partner. Really looking for a leader.
If you ain't doing nothing more than what I'm doing, why do I need you?
Absolutely. So now this is where we say you got two women living in the house and one's a man. Mm-hmm. That's not a sexual thing.
Right.
That's a temperament thing. That's an emotional thing. He traffics, he's moving. His movements are unlike what you really want, because nobody wants to be managed. Everybody wants to be led.
Right. Somebody right in the house, y'all both running in the closet together.
Right. Somebody going to step up and lead. Right. Well, Mr. Sensitive oftentimes is not going to be that guy unless you give him room to grow up.
Right.
And that's something we don't have time to talk about. But the solution to all of these are, Torri, is that your job, ladies, please hear me very clearly, when you're living with a mama's boy, your job is not to be another mother to him. No. That's not what he needs.
And your job is also not to change him.
Absolutely not. Your job is to back up and allow him room to grow and help him when he's asking, providing resources or whatever, but being there as a support. You're not to take charge, because that's not going to help this guy.
Right. And I think the key is that when you marry a mama's boy, if you're in a relationship with a mama's boy, is for you to step back in those areas to give him room to grow. Because typically what happens as a strong woman, as an independent woman, you'll see he's not moving fast enough in certain areas, and you'll just, I got it.
I got this.
I got it. I'll take care of it.
I'm all right.
That never gives him the room to grow. And so you have to be willing to step back. That doesn't mean step back and then push him.
Right.
You don't do that either, but you step back and give him the room and allow him room for him to grow. Allow him room for him to step up in those roles, because he's never fulfilled those roles.
He's never had to.
In
most cases.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you don't step back, he will stay a mama's boy. And that was the biggest thing for me, is that I had to learn how to step back in certain areas to allow Glenn to grow in those areas, for him to step up and move into his role as a man in certain areas, so that he can no longer be a mama's boy. And the same thing with my son. I had to, as he got older, I had to not push him, but step back and not come to his rescue.
Absolutely.
Oh, message. That's the rescue piece, but we can't even go into that. That's a whole nother conversation about single moms rescuing their sons. I love all of this conversation. I love everything that we've touched on, because the stuff you guys are listing, these are reasons people get out of relationships. They decide, nope, I'm done. It's over. No. And your book not only tells you who he is, but it tells you now how to live with him. Yeah. And it's funny because you guys have been doing DISC. When I was reading this, I was like, they've been doing this assessment way before they was really doing the assessment. DISC is in this book.
You built our life on this thing.
You did. You built your life on this concept. And it's very evident to me when I finally really, because I've had the book for years, but I'm gonna be honest, I started it and never finished it until, and I read it in a day. It's an easy read, people.
Yeah.
This is a very easy read.
All of our books were designed to be read in less than an hour if you sit down from cover to cover, and realize, because we realize, people ain't got time, one, and two, a lot of the people that we are, quite frankly, are targeting, wouldn't consider themselves as heavy readers, right? And so we're not going to sit and give you a novel. We want to give you a snapshot. And the biggest thing, we would like the opportunity to work with you, because I think that this is simply the first step. Yeah. Once you get this information, you're going to need a community to help you grow it. It's almost like a farmer. This book is simply a seed. It has to be planted in a garden, which is your heart. And then that has to be nurtured by a community of people who think like you, who move like you. And quite frankly, they're all there to add value and grow with you and not judge. But like, hey, man, we all need some help. That's what I always say. Like, ain't nobody safe. How
do they get that help from you? How do they get, because that's where I want to go. How do they get the help from you?
Real simple, GlennPBrooksJr.com. You can right there. If you look at the down over Sheri's head, GlennPBrooksJr.com. Simply go there. You can find out everything from our MAPS Relationship Academy. We run a group coaching environment. You're very familiar with it, where we get the chance to coach people in 5 different Zoom rooms. One is for couples, one is for parents, one is for singles who are positioning themselves to become the best version of themselves, so that when they get married, they are 2 wholes coming together, not 2 halves trying to make a whole. And then one for
we have an individual men's only group and also a women's only group. On that website, you can also find out information about the assessment we've been talking about, the W2J, the Welcome to the Jungle assessment. You can find out more information on that. You can also go ahead and order your assessment so that you can take it.
You get the books.
You can order our books, and this is the book, I'm trying to get it, the one we've been talking about today, Living with a Momma's Boy. There's a link to all of our books. They're available on Amazon. There's a link where you can go and purchase any of our books as well as other products. If you want to learn more information about our coaching programs, whether it's individual coaching or becoming a part of the MAPS Relationship Academy, there's a link where you will schedule a free discovery session with us, where one of us will talk to you on the phone for about 15 minutes, get to know you, find out what your situation is, and determine whether or not we're fit for you and if we can help you.
Yep. That's it. Real simple.
And it's simple and it's awesome. And it's nothing like being in a room with a group of people. So I'm going to end this live because I think it's amazing what we covered tonight. I'm Dr. Torri J. I'm the founder and CEO of the Fatherless Generation Foundation. And what we proved today is you not only can live with a mama's boy, but you can also break the cycle. Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.